How did political events and societal norms in England in the late 1500s influence the sentiments expressed by Shakespeare's play and the way it was received by the audiences?
In his books and plays, William Shakespeare makes a social commentary on societal norms in England in the 1500s.
Anti-Semitism was very prevalent during the 1500s. These themes can be seen throughout Shakespeare's writing, and especially in The Merchant of Venice. Martin Luther, a theologist, priest, and monk, published a book called On the Jews and Their Lies in 1543 that discriminated towards Jews. Luther puts Jews in a very negative light and criticizes them. He even suggests many ways to commit a mass genocide and permanently oppress them or rid the world of them. Jews during the Middle Ages were restricted and disabled from many activities, occupations, and places of residence. Jews were only allowed jobs dealing with money lending or peddling. Peddling is going from house to house trying to sell a good or product. Sometimes they were not even allowed to have these types of professions. In addition to occupational restrictions, Jews could not live in many places. This led to a high concentration of Jews living in the ghettos. Furthermore, they were not allowed to own land, had to pay extra taxes, and could not dress certain ways. Whether or not Shakespeare was actually anti-Semitic does not deny the fact that those themes are still very apparent in The Merchant of Venice.
Government structure and the concept of law also influenced Shakespeare's writing. His portrayal of Venetian society in his play The Merchant of Venice was largely rooted in the government and social norms of England where he was living and writing. This is evident in the way Shakespeare developed Portia's character to talk about mercy and use the law as many Christians in Elizabethan English would have. In Act 4, Portia convinces the Venetian court that Shylock should show mercy for Antonio and is also guilty of plotting the death of a Venetian. However, she is not very merciful with Shylock's punishment. This illustrates Shakespeare tying common views from late 16th century England of the Old versus New Testament into his portrayal of the law. Queen Elizabeth I, who ruled over England during Shakespeare's time, was known to integrate politics and religion within society. The overwhelming societal belief of Elizabethan Christians was that the New Testament advocated for mercy over just punishment in the name of the law, and that God would give salvation to those followers that showed mercy for others. This ideology allows Portia to use the law against Shylock. Combined with the prevalent ideals of anti-Semitism at this time, this could be a factor that influenced Shakespeare to write Portia's character in this way, turning the law against Shylock and refusing to show him as much mercy as she previously advocated for.
Women had a lot of restrictions in England in the 1500s. These restrictions are shown in many of Shakespeare's books, and they are also shown in The Merchant of Venice. Though women were important, they were often looked down upon, and their main purpose was to cook, clean, and take care of children. In the 1500s, there was a norm for women to be married or yet to be married. It was very uncommon for a woman not to be married and often looked down upon. When women got married, the men practically owned them. Women were known as the weaker sex physically and emotionally. They needed someone to take care of them, such as a husband, but even if they weren't married yet, then the brothers or father of the women would take care of her. This is evident in The Merchant of Venice when Portia's father marries her off. In their society, as a woman, people assume that she cannot take care of herself or make it in the world without a male supporting her every move. The male in the family was supposed to be in charge of keeping the family in order and supporting everyone. They had to be strong for everyone, and they had to handle the ordeals of the family. Women weren't allowed to go to university, and they could not vote in political office. Women were unable to study the same things as men, and it was assumed that women were only led by their passions. It was very uncommon for women at this time to have jobs and do anything other than cook, clean, or take care of the other people in their family. Women also had little control of property over this time. At this time, women were highly valued for their physical features and were known to be passive and submissive.
Social classes are an extremely important part of The Merchant of Venice. The differences in status are evident between Christians and Jews, men and women, and master and servant.
The caste system in England in the late 1500s was called feudalism. This was a system where royalty was on top and the nobles were right below them. Nobles were awarded land in exchange for fighting in the English army. Below them were vassals, who were the tenants of the nobles. Finally, the serfs were the lowest class that had to do labor on a noble's land in exchange for protection. This system was coming to an end while Shakespeare was writing The Merchant of Venice, but it had not completely disappeared. Another system that was a popular philosophy during Shakespeare's time was called natural law. This idea was popular with famous philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. It was the idea that people have a place in the world and could not move up or down because that would mess up the course of the universe. This could be why there are such strict distinctions between upper and lower class in Shakespeare's books. Shakespeare liked to make social commentary on society in his plays, so the marriage of Portia and Bassanio across class lines could be a comment on how people shouldn't always marry for money. In The Merchant of Venice, Portia is a woman marrying down for love instead of up for money. With all of the ideologies prevalent in England in the 1500s, anti-Semitism, law and government, women's roles, and social classes, Shakespeare's writing was affected, and so was the storyline of The Merchant of Venice.